always thought moving to Willow Creek was the best decision I ever made. After my wife passed 5 years ago, it was just me and my daughter, Emily. She was only 12 back then, and I wanted her to grow up somewhere safe. Tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, the kind of suburban dream you see in brochures. My job as a firefighter had taken its toll, but retirement finally gave me a chance to slow down, to focus on Emily, and to build the kind of life my wife and I had once dreamed. About most mornings, I'd sit out on the porch with a mug of black coffee, watching the sun rise over the cul-de-sac. Emily would be inside, humming along to her favorite playlists while getting ready for school. The neighborhood felt alive with the sounds of sprinklers, barking dogs, and pickup trucks rolling down the street. To me, it was America at its finest. But where there's peace, there's always someone who can't stand it. In Willow Creek, that someone was Karen Whitfield, our HOA president. At first, I thought she was just a little strict, reminding folks to mow their lawns, sending out the occasional newsletter about trash pickup times. But it didn't take long before I realized Karen wasn't just keeping order, she was ruling over it. She had this way of twisting her authority, turning neighbor against neighbor. A flag hung an inch too low, Christmas lights left up a week too long, a pickup truck parked a foot past the curb. Karen would notice, and Karen would strike. And once she set her eyes on you, you became her project. Unfortunately, I became her project the moment I stopped bending to her will. It started small, the way most nightmares do. One afternoon, I came home from picking Emily up at school and found a bright yellow slip taped to my mailbox. Violation notice. It read in bold letters. According to Karen, my grass had grown an inch taller than the HOA standard. I laughed it off at first, but that laugh faded when I saw 3 more notices waiting inside the mailbox. One for leaving my trash can at the curb too long, one for a small oil stain in the driveway, and one for Emily's car parked in front of the house overnight. At first, I tried to reason with her. I showed her that the oil spot was from a visiting neighbor's SUV. I explained that Emily had parked in front because I was fixing something in the garage, but Karen didn't care about explanations. To her, rules were rules, and breaking them, even by an inch, was a personal insult. The notices kept piling up, each one carrying the threat of fines that seemed to grow larger every week. I'd open the envelope, feel that thin sheet of paper in my hand, and my stomach would sink. It wasn't just the money, it was the principle. It felt like an attack, like someone was slowly dismantling the little sanctuary Emily and I had built. One night, after working in the garage, I stepped out into the cool air and noticed Karen standing across the street, arms folded, staring. At my house, the street lamps cast long shadows, and for a moment it felt like I was in some kind of showdown. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just stared until I went back inside. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about rules or community standards. It was about control. And Karen had decided that breaking me down was her mission. Days later, I found another notice, but this one was different. Failure to comply will result in legal action. The words punched through me like a fist. Emily read it over my shoulder, and I saw her face twist with fear. She asked if we'd have to move. I told her no, but in my gut, I wasn't so sure. I knew then that Karen wasn't going to stop, and deep down, I could feel it. Something much bigger was coming. The breaking point came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Emily was in the backyard playing fetch with our dog Buddy when I heard a sharp knock at the front door. I opened it to find 2 sheriff's deputies standing on my porch, their patrol SUV idling at the curb. And there she was, Karen, standing, smugly behind them with a clipboard in her hand. One deputy, Officer Marks, cleared his throat. "Mr. Miller, we received a complaint from your HOA president regarding unauthorized modifications to your property. We need to take a quick look inside." I froze. Unauthorized modifications? I hadn't touched a thing. My heart pounded as I glanced back at Emily peeking through the blinds, worry etched across her face. Karen leaned forward, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "See? This is what happens when you ignore the rules. You brought this on yourself, David." But before I could respond, the second deputy's radio crackled. A familiar voice came through. Steady, commanding. "Unit 12, hold your position. This is Officer Reyes. I'll handle this personally." The deputy looked at me, his expression shifting. "You know Reyes?" I nodded, gripping the edge of the doorframe. "Yeah, he's an old friend." Saved my life once in a fire. He knows the truth about me and about this neighborhood. For the first time, Karen's smirk faltered. She hadn't expected backup to come from my side, and in that moment, I realized the battle lines had shifted. Now, before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something straight from the heart. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Imagine standing there, your daughter watching from the window, the so-called HOA president smirking behind the sheriff's deputies, and your home, your sanctuary, suddenly under attack. Would you have stood your ground? Or would you have given in just to make the harassment stop? I want to hear your take on this. Drop a comment right now and let me know what state or what country you're watching from. I read every single comment and I'll reply to as many as I can because these stories aren't just mine. They belong to all of us who've ever been pushed around by people in power. And if you're enjoying this story so far, make sure you like this video and hit that subscribe button. After that day with the deputies on my porch, I knew things were only going to get worse. Karen wasn't rattled for long. If anything, Officer Reyes stepping in seemed to ignite something inside her. She doubled down, and the harassment reached a level I couldn't have imagined. It began with Buddy, our golden retriever. One evening, Emily came running inside crying, holding a crumpled slip of paper she'd found shoved under our gate. In bold red letters, it read, "Pets must remain indoors. Barking after 8 p.m. is a violation." Buddy was a calm dog, gentle, loyal, hardly ever barked. But somehow, Karen had twisted even his existence into an infraction. A week later, I caught her standing at the edge of my property with her phone pointed at Buddy, recording him while he napped in the sun. It felt less like neighborhood watch and more like stalking. Then came Emily. She was 17, smart as a whip, and getting ready for college applications. One morning, she came downstairs pale and shaken. Someone had slipped a letter into her car windshield overnight. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a signature to know who was behind it. The letter warned that children loitering in driveways were a safety hazard, and that continued violations could jeopardize the family's standing with the HOA. Seeing my daughter, my pride and joy, targeted like that lit a fire. Inside me, financially, the squeeze tightened. The fines stacked up like bricks on my back. $100 for a lawn violation, $250 for failure to comply, $500 for repeat infractions. In just 2 months, the total surpassed $3,000. My savings, meant for Emily's tuition, were being siphoned away by paper threats with Karen's signature at the bottom. Each notice came in the same white envelope, and each one felt like another, nail hammered into our stability. But it wasn't just us. Slowly, I realized Karen was spreading her poison throughout Willow Creek. Mr. Johnson, our retired veteran neighbor, found himself fined for flying his American flag too close to the street. The Jeffersons down the road were written up for leaving Christmas lights on past New Year's. And the Parkers, who hosted a summer barbecue every July, were told that open flames on community property were a violation, even though it was their own backyard. It was like Karen had declared war on the very culture of our neighborhood. The flags, the cookouts, the lights, the laughter. Things that made this place feel like home were suddenly criminalized. One by one, neighbors began showing up at my door. First Mr. Johnson, then the Jeffersons, then the Parkers. Each carried their own stack of violation notices, their own stories of intimidation. And together, over coffee at my kitchen table, we pieced it all together. Patterns in the fines, misused HOA funds, expenses that didn't add up. Karen wasn't just a tyrant, she was funneling money. Our money. That's when we decided we wouldn't just endure this anymore. We would fight back. The night of the HOA board meeting felt like walking into a courtroom. The community center was packed. Neighbors shoulder to shoulder, voices low, tension hanging thick in the air. Karen sat at the head of the long table, her clipboard stacked with papers. A smug smile stretched across her face. She tapped her pen like a judge ready to deliver a sentence. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, holding a thick binder. Inside were weeks of collected evidence, violation notices, suspicious expense reports, even photos neighbors had taken, of Karen using HOA funds for personal errands. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, scanning the room, "this isn't about lawns or mailboxes. This is about power, about someone who's been abusing all of us for years. Gasps rippled through the crowd as I laid out the proof. Thousands of dollars spent on maintenance that never happened, checks signed out to companies that didn't exist, fines funneled into her personal account. Karen slammed her pen down. Lies! All of it! But then Mr. Johnson stood. His voice was gravelly but strong. We serve this country so people like you couldn't trample freedom. And I'll be damned if I let you trample it here. The crowd erupted, neighbors shouting, demanding answers. Officer Reyes, who had been quietly standing in the back, stepped forward. Karen Whitfield, based on the evidence presented and corroborated by county records, you're under investigation for fraud and misuse of funds. Her face drained of color. The Queen of Willow Creek cornered in front of her kingdom. And as the deputies escorted her out, I realized this wasn't just my fight anymore. It was everyone's. When the dust finally settled, Willow Creek felt different. For the first time in years, neighbors smiled when they passed each other. On the street, flags waved freely again, Christmas lights glowed well into January, and laughter returned to backyard barbecues. At home, Emily hugged me tighter than she had in months. Buddy curled up at our feet, tail thumping against the floor as if he knew the storm had passed. For once, I didn't feel the weight of notices or fines pressing against my chest. I felt peace. I sat on the porch one evening, coffee in hand, and watched the sunset paint the cul-de-sac gold. Justice had been served, but more than that, truth had won. And I realized something. Sometimes standing up isn't just about protecting your own home. Sometimes it's about showing your entire community that freedom is worth fighting for.